Hey, it's Monster, one half of your dynamic hosting duo of the Nerdy Man Room Show. Proudly bringing you another Man Room Short. Enjoy, and as always, please remember, viewer discretion is advised.
About What If Comics. And again, Kev, we invited you because you are the fountain of knowledge here. So I know a little bit about the origin of What If and Elseworld stuff, but probably not near as much as you. So I can share a few things I know, but you feel free to jump in and take us on a ride because, again, you're going to know far more than we do, probably.
Cool. Well, I hate to bust all y'all's bubble. Let me start out with the reason why What Ifs existed. It was to keep people employed. Basically, you had all of this talent. You already had people working on things, but you needed to keep them employed. You also needed to keep acknowledging your copyright by keeping these characters in print. So if you didn't have plans for them, you gave them carte blanche to say, look, go create me something really cool to read. It doesn't have to be in continuity, and earn your damn paycheck. And basically that's what they did.
Yeah, and from what I looked at, because I looked at a lot of history of both DC and Marvel before this, and I'm not a historian, but just what I was able to look up, and it looks like, and we all know DC, had that stretch of time from the 40s to the 60s. Continuity wasn't even a thing, and then you get into their competition with Marvel in the 60s and start going from there. And continuity is a big thing at this point, but DC's was muddled, right? I mean, we had different Earths everywhere. They couldn't figure out what stories fit where, so they just started calling the stuff imaginary stories if it didn't fit, but they were still writing them, I'm assuming, to do exactly what you said, keep people employed and keep the copyrights active.
They already had a multiverse with Earth 1 and Earth 2 before multiverse was a thing. DC did.
Yeah, and I saw that. I didn't realize that they tried to lump their stuff under what they called imaginary stories, and I don't think they were well cataloged, and a lot of people couldn't tell you what fit into which continuity and which one didn't. Which brought about
your average fan that maybe doesn't pick up books, say they pick up an occasional book. If they go pick up one of those titles like that, like, at least with Marvel, you knew it says "What If." With DC, you didn't. You picked up something, you read it, you think this is the real deal, and you get to argue with a comic fan that reads every issue, you got a problem.
Well, and that's one of the reasons when they finally branded the Elseworlds logo, everybody knew when they saw that star that that's what actually caused it to have its huge impact when people realized, okay, we're stepping outside of continuity, and I want to read a Batman story, but I don't like the Batman that is on the shelf right now. Okay, here you go.
And so let me ask this, Kev. Yeah. From what I saw, it looked like Marvel started their What If series in '77, and DC didn't brand Elseworlds until like '89.
Roughly like late '88. They did like 2 years of horrible, good stuff, but no way to really brand it.
Did they take a cue from Marvel and branding it that way to try and get the readers to buy into it more? I mean, and I know you said why they produced the stories, right, to keep the copyrights and everything, but did they do that branding just to try and set it apart and say, okay, we're going to clean some of this up some? Because that's what the purpose of Crisis was, but even after Crisis, there was still some, at least for me as a reader, and I was young back then, I was still very, very tiny, so I was still a little confused all throughout the late '80s on what fit and what didn't.
You got to remember that they were all about DC. All back then was about keeping it compartmentalized and streamlined. So you had your Elseworlds, and then when you had what I guess you'd consider Black Label stuff now was like your Vertigo. And then so they wanted you to be able to stay in your lane and enjoy what you enjoyed and move along. And with the Elseworlds, they'd already had a multiverse, like we talked about when you look at the earlier stuff from the 60s. There was already multiverse stuff being cooked in. Like what happens when you have Superman in the Phantom Zone, life in the Phantom Zone. Was it not, this, that, life on Krypton. But the coolest part about it was when they actually got their crap straight, you could go to places that you yourself had always wondered about. But what was different between the What If usually had 3 stories, 1 main and 2 backups. Elseworlds were usually a 1 or 2 parter because they told a lot more story with the Elseworlds than just half a book. So you really got to flush out a world. Think of it, Earth X and the CW. You know, you got that level inside every Elseworlds, which was really cool.
Yeah, and the What If always, the Elseworlds to me was a little bit different too, because they start out with here's a completely different take on the story, whereas What If said, okay, everything's the same up to this point, and at this point it diverges.
Yeah, it was typically like a crossroads, so to speak, and how many of those stories wound up becoming like, and some of those, especially some of the ones wrote in the late 70s, early 80s, wound up being actual continuity versus stories later, like Smart Hulk or the Invaders coming back
Jane Foster as Thor.
Yeah, I mean, there were several things that they wound up doing in the late 70s, early 80s as a what if that wound up weaving its way into continuity later, because it's like, hey, this is a pretty fucking good idea.
Yeah, what if Conan made it to modern day? I mean, a bunch of stuff that, and the scary part is, I don't know if that was a general progression or if it was just straight up crap laziness. Let's see what Wallace did. Oh, okay, we could do that. Yeah, that was awesome. You don't know. We're not behind the boardroom doors, but ideas come from everywhere.
I always thought they were great books, especially, I mean, whether it was Elseworlds or What If, but it was one of those things of, okay, you got somebody who's telling a story, so let's just grab Chris Claremont, for instance. He's always over here telling the X-Men stories, but maybe he wants to tell this one Spider-Man story, but it doesn't fit in the continuity of now. So he can still go right and call it a What If.
Well, and then you got to understand too, there was that strange, we haven't covered it yet, but there's a strange point in time when Marvel and DC worked together.
Yeah.
To create Amalgam.
I've got a few of the big books, like they call them magazines, but like the Hulk and the Batman and the Superman one with the Spider-Man on the cover. Those are really cool books.
Well, yeah, but no, they actually did a brand with the Amalgam title where you had Bruce Wayne with Wolverine.
Yeah, just after the Versus books.
Yeah, they called them Dark Claw. But yeah, they actually worked together to produce some really cool what we'd call mashups today. And some of them, they even got more than one issue.
Yeah, because I think they went back and did a whole second run, or I say a second run. They did I think they did, what was it, 12 or 24 issues, and then they went back and did another 12 or something a couple of years later.
But yeah, they were cool, and that's when they actually worked together. And then you had when Stan Lee, oh my Lord, you'd have thought the world stopped when he decided that he took DC's money and, DC's world according to Stan Lee and rewrote everybody's origin.
And you know what? I actually have a lot of those, if not all of them. And those were great. It was just one of those things where, as much as I enjoyed those, it was harder to read them because unfortunately, and I hate to say this because I loved a lot of stuff he did, but they just felt dated, right? That they're like, okay, we're going to tell an origin story the way Stan would have. And
Stan Lee's The Marvel Way is very, very 70s. I mean, yeah, and you can go back and read a lot of the old Spider-Man titles that he was still writing in the 70s. Well, his attempt to be hip here and there is like, oh, this is bad. It's bad, Stan.
Just in today's world, right? That's what, to me, it didn't hold up. But I think they were still great stories. I actually have several of them. I have the Green Lantern, Flash, Superman.
Read The Death of Gwen Stacy. If that don't tear you up by the end of it, you've got no soul. I mean, it's still a great story, but the dialogue, I guess, is what I'm looking at, is very dated.